in this meeting so that folks can tune in at a later date and join in. So we'll get started in just a couple of minutes to allow time for more people to join in. I've got 12 o'clock on my computer, so let's go ahead and get started without any further ado. I am Liz Crooks, the director of the Pentacrest Museums. I'd like to welcome you to Bound to Collect, a session of My Collections webinars. Today, we're going to be featuring our two current exhibitors, Lindsay Moen with her collection of Peter Rabbit Goes Global, and Tami Finley, authors, A Game for the Ages. I'm so proud to say that both are librarians and both are graduates of our MLS program right here at the University of Iowa. So that's always nice to welcome alumni to the show. Lindsay is the lead public service librarian in special collections and archives here at the University of Iowa. I've known Lindsay for quite some time. I feel very lucky to be able to say that. And without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay and let her tell us all about Peter.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Liz. Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today with the wonderful Pentacrest Museums, an institution here on campus that is definitely near and dear to my heart. So, as Liz stated, I'm Lindsay Moen, lead public services librarian here at the University of Iowa, Special Collections and Archives. So, for those of you who may not be familiar with our department, we are located on the third floor of the main library here on campus. And we are actually part of the library where we hold the rare and unique materials that cannot circulate or be checked out for various reasons. So that may include things as old as medieval manuscripts, all the way up to more modern and contemporary materials, such as university organizational papers and artists' books. And today I will be sharing with you my Collections exhibit that features some of my foreign language editions of the Tale of Peter Rabbit, Beatrix Potter's arguably most famous children's book. But before, let me talk to you a little bit about how I got here as a collector. So next slide, please, Liz. Thank you. So I'm bringing you today directly from the Peter Rabbit room that you see in the picture. So my interest in Peter Rabbit really started, since I was born, really. So the first toy that I decided was the toy. Was a Peter Rabbit stuffed animal, and I had family members notice that. And it was the early 90s. It was a great time for marketing and merchandising for Peter Rabbit and Beatrix Potter. So they got me more, and I slowly amassed more materials, more stuffed animals for a collection that I didn't even realize was starting when I was an infant. But it really didn't start to take off until I actually was working in the special collections and archives here on campus. So in 2010, I started as a student employee, and I was really exposed to the rare book world and the art and culture of collecting, and specifically how Beatrix Potter materials really do bridge that gap between the cute children's culture and the more academic and sometimes expensive collecting world of rare books and materials. Next slide, please. So the thing that really sparked my interest was what I call our own treasure here at the University of Iowa for anything Beatrix Potter and Peter Rabbit. Kind of an artistic photo, but you can see here we have a book, a photo from the privately printed tale of Peter Rabbit. So in my opinion, as a collector, this is probably the creme de la creme, the object one would have as a collector. So it's a privately printed Tale of Peter Rabbit, not a first edition, sort of edition zero. So this could be a whole talk in itself. And I know a lot of my fellow Beatrix Potter Society members on the call know a lot about the history of the publication of the Tale of Peter Rabbit. But the long and short of it is basically Beatrix Potter wanted to publish the Tale of Peter Rabbit and was turned down by at least 6 publishers, including the publisher that eventually would publish her book, Frederick Warne. Things like should be in color. It's too small. It's too long. It wouldn't sell for enough. And as we can imagine, being an unmarried woman at the time, you can see the why folks might not have taken her seriously. So she decided to publish it herself and out of pocket for a 250 print run. And we at the University of Iowa are so fortunate to have one of those copies here that was donated to us in 1978 by James N. and Christine Wallace, which was part of a gift and donation package of about 238 rare children's books. So being able to experience this in person really rekindled my appreciation for Beatrix Potter, her books, and really the rare book collecting. Next slide, please, Liz. So Beatrix Potter Society, that's definitely part of my story. So in 2019, my husband actually gifted me a subscription to this organization because he figured that the newsletters would be a really great addition to my collection, which I agreed with. So was a member, really enjoying the newsletters for a couple of years. And then in 2021, there was a call for the need for a secretary position that they had trouble filling. And I thought I didn't even, I was a new member, I'm based in the US, and I'm thinking, how am I going to attend meetings? But luckily, well, not luckily because of COVID, but luckily they changed the way that their meetings were with more Zoom attendance. And so decided to throw my name in the ring, and they needed somebody. So long story short, I've been a trustee and a member of that organization since. Now I'm the website manager. So I encourage everybody to take a look at our organization. You can just Google Beatrix Potter Society. Really great. And that has really sort of helped me in my journey of collecting. So there's me at Beatrix Potter's house that I visited for the first time in 2023, which was a great experience. So next slide, please. So being a part of the society has really helped me learn more about the materials, the history of Beatrix Potter, and determining authenticity, all those things that one might think of in collecting, and overall just where to find items and making great connections with my fellow members who've given me duplicates or helped gift materials or things like that are just wonderful. But you will see from these images that I really do collect everything. It doesn't look like there's that much in the room with the pictures, but there is. It can't capture everything. But I really collect everything, but my favorite things to collect are any books, paper-based materials, ephemera. I also have a soft spot for those stuffed animals. But overall, anything that really helps paint the picture of the history of literary merchandising. It's really it's very interesting to me, especially working in a special collections and archives where we're saving all of those things. But Beatrix Potter, the world of the literary merchandising is really, really fascinating. Um, she created a lot of her own um, merchandising objects, which she called her sideshows. So designing games, stuffed animals, anything like that. She wanted to expand on the literary universe that she already had within her books with merchandising products. And she was also very particular about the branding and the imagery and what it looked like and how it translated to products. And I think that legacy you can still see, many, many years after her death, we still see the high quality of merchandising that you get with her objects. So it makes it really fun to collect, for sure. So next slide. Thank you, Liz. So let's talk a little bit about the exhibit, the My Collections exhibit itself that is currently on display at the Pentacrest Museums. I definitely mulled over a variety of different things I could put in there. We're limited to a case. It's a large case, but it's still just one. So you want to kind of think of a theme. So I ultimately decided on highlighting those multi-language versions of the Tale of Peter Rabbit. They're easy to display. They're small enough to really pack them in without it looking too cluttered. And what I also would hope that a lot of it would resonate with a lot of students here on campus from different multicultural backgrounds to perhaps see a story that they may know in their native language, and also knowing that my fellow collector was also a librarian, that really made it kind of obvious choice to pick books, something literary themed. And it just made the most sense. And of course, I had to add in a couple stuffed animals to draw in the eye and fill some of those gaps too. But the case currently holds about 30 copies. And a full list can be found on the Pentacrest website that has the dates of the objects, the language, those kinds of things too. So next I'll kind of highlight a couple of the different highlights of the collection. So one of these first ones I find just one of the most interesting things, the initial teaching alphabet. I'm not sure, I never heard of it before I saw this when I was doing some searching online, but this is an alphabet of 44 characters designed by Sir James Pittman to help children read English more effectively. And the alphabet is based on a phonemic sound system of English, using Roman alphabet, um, each distinct sound with a syllable. So you can look at this and you can read it. You know what it's trying to say. You can see once upon a time there were four little rabbits. And however, as you can also imagine, there were some obvious drawbacks. So it began being taught in England in 1960 and in the US in 1963. But children who mastered it were getting frustrated because when they would go out in the world and see things written in English, it wouldn't match. So it was something that they did not really continue. But we did have a couple of publications of Beatrix Potter's works in it, and I just find it so interesting and strange. So, and next we have also a fan favorite. Oh, and we also have a lot of copies of these at the University of Iowa, along not only my private collection, but also here on campus. So if any of these tickle your fancy, please come and visit us at Special Collections. We can show you. We have actually a large holdings of Beatrix Potter materials. So if this interests you, please come visit. But anyways, so here we have a copy that was produced by the British Museum that you can still buy today. Faithfully translated into the script of Middle Kingdom Egypt. This task was carried out by Richard Parkinson, who was a museum expert, and John Noon, a medical researcher who has an interest in Egypt. As you can imagine, the translation was a little interesting because you have things like the landscape and wildlife that Beatrix Potter would have experienced in the UK, and the Egyptians did not have words for things like gooseberry or black currant or potato, so they had to sort of get creative with that. And as the creators of this say, Beatrix Potter's words sometimes do not really fall into ancient Egyptian. The surviving texts provide no easy model for such colloquial phrases such as now run along and don't get into mischief. But fun, they use all the same images that Beatrix Potter would use with the translation and some notes that kind of give an explanation on why they chose the text that they did. And the last thing that I wanted to feature today is, of course, another fan favorite. We have a copy of this at Special Collections as well, is a Klingon version. So for those of you who may not be Trekkies, I can't do the thing, but you get the idea. Klingon is a constructed language spoken by fictional alien race called the Klingons in the Star Trek universe. So the Klingon language was also invented for these movies, for the Star Trek, this third Star Trek movie, and a Klingon Language Institute was established in 1992 to promote this language. So in 2022, Klingon Esther Lukin translated The Tale of Peter Rabbit, and it was then later published in June 2023 by a German publisher. So just random, fun, strange, something as a collector I absolutely had to have. So to sort of wrap up my portion, other things that I considered when I was looking into filling this case, there's the obvious choices like ceramics. There's lots of ceramics that have been published for merchandising, plushies, something we American piracies. So again, this is a whole talk in itself. There are pirated versions of the Tale of Peter Rabbit, as in the U.S. copyright was not properly established. So you go to the antique stores here in the U.S. and you see a lot of Tale of Peter Rabbits that just don't look quite right. Those are American piracy. So if this interests you, reach out to the Society for more information. But the kind of runners up I had were definitely like those exhibit programs, the ephemera, the history of displaying of Peter Rabbit and Beatrix Potter materials throughout different parts of the world. So I love to collect exhibit catalogs and things like that. It's just very unique and things that were really meant to be saved. So, anyways, so to kind of give my wrapping up theme. So really in general, that working in a library as a non-curator, so we have lots of wonderful curators in our department. My job is public services like librarian, really focusing on helping the public and connecting them with the resources we have. That's really helped me shape how I collect and really realize the value of saving and cataloging materials. So my own collecting helps me in my role as a librarian and vice versa. This, especially working with donors, understanding firsthand how a person can really feel strongly about their collections, when sometimes as staff, we see the materials and we think this is just going to take up space or use up resources. So it really is a blend of feeding that collecting bug, but also gathering items in one contextual space and making sure that I'm making conscious choices about what I'm collecting and why, and in turn, how the public are going to view this gathering of materials. So that's my story. So I'm definitely going to pass it on to my co-presenter and collector, Tami.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. Appreciate it. Glad to hear
Thank
about
you.
your
Thank you.
collection.
Thank you, Lindsay. And you can see, first, I need to apologize to Tami and Lindsay. You have a very novice webinar hoster here, folks. So thank you for bearing with us. But I do want to take a minute to let you know, I should have let you know at the beginning that, well, now I can't go back. This is, yeah, I wanted to share Lindsay's beautiful kitties. And I also wanted to let our audience know that if you have any questions, there are two ways that you can post them. You can post them in the chat and you can post them in the Q&A. And we will be taking all of those questions at the end of the program today. So thank you very much, Lindsay. That was wonderful. I learned so much that I didn't know. And I know I have some questions and I know other folks will too. So with that, let's get back to our regularly scheduled program and let me get us back to authors and turn it over to Tami Finley. Tami is a retired librarian who has very generously shared her love of Authors, A Game for the Ages. Tami, can you tell us a little bit about that?
I certainly can. Thank you again for having me today and for giving me the opportunity to showcase my collection at the university. The author's card game is something that I remember playing as a child. But funny enough, I have 4 siblings and not one of them remember playing it. So it must have been an early indication that librarianship was in my future. I remember very vividly learning the names of the authors: Robert Louis Stevenson, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, Mark Twain, Louisa May Alcott. Those are all names of authors that you would have normally seen in the games that I first became aware of, and that would have been in probably the mid-60s. I started collecting the game because I used to go to antique stores with several friends of mine, and all of them had things that they were always looking for, trying to build their own collections. I did not collect anything at that point. And so I started just keeping my eye out for something that I thought might be a fun thing to look for. And I discovered my first game, my first edition, in Connecticut, of all places. I was visiting friends out there, and both of them are in my same age range, and both from the Midwest originally. Neither one of them had heard of the game either. So that started my collection. And I just started moving through antique stores with a different eye. And then I was fortunate, as I started getting from some of those same friends, they would find games and send me or present me with a edition that I didn't have already. It's really been sort of hit or miss in terms of how I collect. It's just whatever comes across my plate, so to speak. Early on, I did buy quite a few off of eBay once I felt like I had sort of drained the antiques in my area to find different games. I currently have about 40 games, and I do have a couple of duplicates that were given to me as gifts. And so I hang on to those just to be able to share those with other people. The thing that I have learned about the author's games is that, again, there are so many different editions, and I'm going to show you a slide a little bit later of a book that has been published, and their tagline says that it indexes over 300 different editions. So my 40 seems pretty small comparatively to that 300 editions. I haven't actually purchased or found or been given a new game for probably close to 15 years. I have, however, been able to showcase the games at several of the libraries that I worked at. We had cases that I was able to put them in, and were able to talk to patrons about what they were and share some of their memories as well. So the two that you have on the screen now are actually two of the older games. And what I want to point out about these is the graphics on the front. The lithography on some of the older editions are almost as important as what the game itself is contained in the boxes. I mean, they're graphically fine too, but the color illustrations on the boxes sometimes make them worth more than the cards themselves. So that's kind of a fun thing to watch. Liz asked me in our little practice session she said she didn't know how to play the game. And my simplest explanation is that it's like playing Go Fish. Liz, you can go ahead and change the slide. So you can see some of those additions there, and we'll talk about some of the different ones and what makes them unique from some of the others. But you'll notice on the left-hand side, the blue book, that is the compendium of the game, and we'll have a closer up shot in a minute of that. On the right-hand side is an article that was specifically written, I believe it was Country Living magazine or something like that, which talks about author's cards. And those are the only two things that I have ever seen that have been published. There probably are more, but that's what I have come across in my hunting. So Liz, you can go ahead. So again, looking at the lithography, and you can also see that you are coming across some of the different publishers of the game. Parker Brothers was probably one of the most prominent publishers of it. All Fair this is the only All Fair one that I have, and I do not recognize them other than from this box. You might also come across Whitman Publishing, which is also a book publisher, so another name that you would recognize. And then Russell is one that produced a miniature version, and we'll see that shortly. What I want you to notice on the one on the right is it says that it's the Salem edition. And then down where it says Parker Brothers, it also says Salem, Massachusetts. The people that started invented the first game was in 1861, and that was G.M. Whipple and A.A. Smith. Those names mean nothing to me other than that they're associated with this game, but they lived in Salem, Massachusetts, and so that's why they are often credited as Salem editions. And I believe that a lot of that is because the authors in the Salem editions are always the same. They are not always the same from game to game, but the Salem editions hold the same authors. Okay, Liz? So here you can see some of the authors. This is that All Fair one. And what you will see is that there are 4 cards for each author. And what would happen is you would draw, as you do in Go Fish, and then depending on how many players there are, you would try and make what they call a book, and that would include all 4 cards with the same author. So if I said to you, do you have Louisa May Alcott's Little Women? If you had it, you had to give that up to me, and then that would give me another selection in my book. Once I completed the book, I would lay it down, and the person at the end of the game would, with the most books, would be the winner. The thing I also want to point out here is that you will notice that the back of the cards oftentimes have some sort of an illustration or graphic design. And I have a couple here that I'm going to hold up just so you can see sometimes, and it's not that much different from what you would see in regular card decks. But I think some of them are a little, obviously, like this one is a little more flourished than just a contemporary card game, which might just have a simple back like this. So those are fun. And again, what makes them a little more collectible. Okay, Liz. The game in the front there, the author's game with the yellow, and it has Mark Twain on the front of that. That is one that I have seen reproduced a couple of different times. And I put both of these on there just so you can see they're the exact same game, but one is in a condensed box while the other one is a larger box. And it's not any fuller, it's not more authors, it's just that it was packaged differently from the first one, which you would find quite often. Excuse me. In this one, you'll see again, there's those front and back of the cards. The thing that I also want to point out on this is that again, the authors that were included would have been different. But one of the things that on the right-hand side, you'll see it's called famous authors. And oftentimes the name of the game was not just authors. And so you will see in another slide, we're going to look at the Bible authors. There are some that are children's authors. I have another one that is an American author. So they started to change the way the game was played, or the game was presented, just to highlight different backgrounds of authors or their specialty in their writings. Again, if you look at the Mark Twain one there, you can see Huckleberry Finn, The Prince and the Pauper, The Mysterious Stranger, and Tom Sawyer. So not only was I learning the authors' names, but I was learning about the books that they then wrote. And that went on in terms of my librarianship. Although I spent the majority of my career as a children's librarian, I still was very familiar with the works of many of these authors just from playing the game. Okay, Liz? This one is a little bit different in that it's still a Parker Brothers edition, but it is a fancier version, and there are chips. I have not been able to find an instruction sheet that was included with some of these. So I really do not know what the chips were meant for, whether it was a way for you to bid as to, if I will give you 3 chips for the Little Women or Treasure Island or whatever. I'm not sure exactly how those were used, but again, another variation on the exact same game. Okay. This is the one that I was talking about that was the miniatures version, and this is put out by Russell. I'm actually missing one of the games here, and I don't know what exactly that game is at this point. But they were, again, these very tiny, and Liz, I think the next slide has the full deck. Yeah, so you can see it was just a very small box that included in this particular case, Animal Rummy, but the author's cards are exactly the same, where it has the author and the four books that are included. So nice to be able to tuck into a suitcase or along on an outing and be able to pull it out and entertain kids, whatever. That one was a little hard to find the entire row of books or shelf. And so I'm on the lookout occasionally for one to fill in that one that I'm missing. But as long as I have the author's one, I'm okay with it. Some more examples of the lithography, and you can see that they didn't always use the same author on the front of the cover. There's, I believe that's Wadsworth on the left, and then Shakespeare in the middle, and then oftentimes you would see where it was an adult and a child, not necessarily playing the game of authors, but spending time together. So that's a fun thing. The one on the left also, you notice that those are called star authors. And again, a variation where it was just something that they added to the game to take it up another notch. And you could play it as the simple game that we knew, but you could also add in an element that made you look for authors in a different way. This is the Bible authors, and this is one of two sets I have. I believe this one is the Zondervan edition. And this one obviously is a whole different collection of the authors from the books of the Bible. And it's not nearly as flashy as some of the other ones that are out there, but I was thrilled to be able to find this edition of it because it was something totally different from what I'd had in the collection at the time. Okay, there's the close-up of those. So another way to be teaching, the books of the Bible, the authors, and then some of their most well-known phraseology.
But these aren't the only things that you collect, are they, Tami?
No, they are not. Actually, again, as I was out and about looking for the author's cards, I stumbled across some other items. And Liz, you can show that first
Yeah,
one.
let's take a look at those because those are also very, very interesting.
This is the compendium that I mentioned before as well. And this actually was written in 2021. It is the collection of a private collection that then was photographed and identified. It is an amazing book, and I stumbled across it on Amazon of all places, and was able to purchase that. And I have met one other collector, and she may be on watching today, and I was able to purchase a copy for her too, because we have shared many times the different collections that are the difference between our two collections. So I was happy to have that. And it is probably the most authoritative source that I have found on the game. So that's an excellent addition.
And I apologize. I got so excited about your next thing as a bookmaker that I jumped ahead and didn't let you talk about the book. But
that's okay.
I really like these things. So share these stories.
Sure. So the small bottle on the right is actually the right of the pages is actually the first piece that I found. I was working in Cedar Falls, and at an antique store, I came across this small jar, which was for Sanford's library paste. And that sent me down a whole nother rabbit hole. And so I was on the lookout for anything that had to do with library paste. Those are a little bit harder to find, and I specifically only collect the Sanford items. Now, having said that, people new, I looked for Sanford things. So then I started getting ink pieces. And so I have lots of ink wells. I have some advertising pieces. There are more ink bottles, paste bottles than the ones that are here. But as you'll notice, the larger one has, it's sort of a handle on the top, but when you open it up, you will see there is a well for the brush to lay in, and then the outer ring would have been where the paste was. So that piece that sticks up out of the lid protects the handle of the brush. So that's a unique piece too. What I find interesting about these, though, if you'll notice the lid for the smaller jar, it actually talks about writing fluid. So I'm not sure that that's the original lid to that jar, because that one only says library paste. But if you'll notice on the larger one, it says photo paste. And then there's also on the side of that a bottle of ink. I can show it. There's a little bit of it here. I don't know if you'll be able to see it there, but so they advertised other products on their specific products. So that's another fun collection, and the one that I've shared again at multiple libraries where I've worked.
And I think that's another interesting example of lithography in your
Mm-hmm.
collections.
Mm-hmm.
But wait, there's more, isn't there?
Yes, there is. Once a collector, always a collector.
It's a human trait. Tell us about the aprons.
Sure. So I started a little side gig called The Art of the Apron just before COVID hit. I had worked in a small library where funding was minimal for programming, and I had reached out to other librarians to ask if they knew anybody who did a program about vintage aprons. And the response I got back was, I don't, but if you find somebody, let us know. So when I retired, I had collected a few aprons just as I'd been out and about. And I started collecting some more. I started doing research, and I've probably presented now close to 30 programs over the years, libraries, senior living facilities, churches, quilting groups, antique groups. I have a collection of about 300 aprons now. And this particular one is one that's known as would be known as a hostess apron. And a hostess apron was one that you would have worn when you were entertaining, not so much when you were doing cooking, because obviously it would not be one that would protect your clothing very much. The patterns on the left are an addition that I've started collecting. So besides the 300 aprons, I again have advertising pieces. We're going to see some books here in a minute. Anything that has to do with an apron, I have been collecting those because then I can share it in my 1-hour programs. I will also share with you, much like what Lindsay was talking about with Beatrix Potter Society, there's actually an apron museum in Iuka, Mississippi, IUKA, and they have a collection of over 6,000 aprons. I have yet to get there, but one day I will make it. Go ahead, Liz, with the next one. So as a librarian, I'm always looking at books. This is actually a book from, I believe, the early 60s. And this is one that was sort of like a home ec or home living book. And as I flip through it, and there are a number of pictures of women and children oftentimes in aprons. And so I have made a collection of the books that highlight those as well. Okay. And of course, we can't forget the little golden books. It's interesting to me as we have gone through different collections, as I've been out in antique stores and stuff, how many of them are wearing aprons. Here are 2 examples, but the 3 bears, oftentimes Mama Bear has an apron on. A Santa Claus book will often, Mrs. Claus will have an apron on, and they just go on from there. So I like to find ones where it's a child, it's a man, because oftentimes men are not depicted in aprons, even though that's probably where some of the very first aprons were first utilized in jobs. And so I try and find some of those that I can showcase in my presentations as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate you letting me share.
Yes, I know we have some questions already, so let's dive right into those. Well, this first question came in during Lindsay's presentation, but I think it applies to both of you. What is a book that you wish you had in your collection? And Lindsay, why don't you go first?
That's always a tough one, mainly because with collecting Beatrix Potter materials, the expenses can get pretty high up, especially the older the books are. So there's always things I would like to have that I know that I might need to admire through an institution such as ours. But like a true first edition might be kind of nice. Give me a long time to fund that, but I think that would be a pretty cool one to have.
Absolutely. What about you, Tami?
Well, I would agree with Lindsay. The thing that has often kept me from purchasing some of the items on eBay, which is where you find some of the most expensive items, is the expense. I just at this point with 40 in my collection, do I need to have one that's several $100s? No, I don't. But I have been very fortunate again finding the author's book, but also in terms of the author's pieces. I mean, the apron pieces, I have found a number of books on the history of aprons, on dating fabric from aprons, feed sacks that are related to aprons. So I feel fortunate to be able to have those. And I'm lucky enough that I have found some of those at used bookstores or used book sites.
Here's a question originally for Lindsay, but I think also works for both of you. And this is going to be a tough one. What is the favorite item in your collection? Lindsay, can you pick one?
No. I say that a favorite item that I have on display is that initial teaching alphabet, and I have another copy sitting here to remind people that just sort of weird. I just like how random it is. I didn't know about it until I was looking online, and I thought, what language is this? So I think anything that's different or unique. So I'll go with that answer as my favorite thing that I have on display.
Okay, that's fair. Tami, what about you?
I think the oldest one, and I can't picture it for you or point to it in the picture now, but the very first one that I found that started the collection holds a special place in my heart. So, and it's the same way with the library piece, that one little jar that said, "Oh my gosh, this is something you have to have."
Uh, Here's a question about the author's cards. Are the authors different in the various editions, or are the different editions all made with the same core group of classic authors?
In that Salem edition that we talked about, I think that anything that has the Salem edition noted on the box, I believe those are all the same authors, but certainly there are different ones. It took a long time for there to be a woman included, and Louisa May Alcott was one of the first ones, and then Cornelia, I think it's Meigs, Meigs, who has an Iowa connection. I think she was another one that was added later. You will not find very many what I consider to be contemporary authors, although there are contemporary author editions that came out much later. And in the children's collection, the ones that are specifically children's authors, those are completely different. You'll find Rudyard Kipling, Dr. Seuss, I believe, is in that one. So some that you would definitely recognize, but would be very different from those first Salem editions.
Let's see. Tami, this question is for you. Do you have a favorite author?
That is another hard one. Again, as the children's librarian, I spent most of my time reading those things. But I have to say, I had the pleasure of serving on the Newbery Committee in 2008. And so my heart belongs to the book that we selected that year, which was Good Masters, Sweet Ladies by Laura Amy Schlitz.
Wow. This isn't so much a question, but a fun fact for us all. This attendee shares that the M&S Archive at Leeds University in England has a collection of Beatrix Potter merchandise covering over 40 years of material, and it includes a broad range of items. Well, it's free to visit. You have to make an appointment. Lindsay, is that a place that you have checked off your travel list yet?
Not yet, but it's definitely on there. And we've got some cool information on our website too. So
Awesome. Here's another Beatrix Potter question. Are the Bunnykins dish sets connected to Beatrix Potter's brand? It's a favorite gift of this person to give.
sure, they are not. So that is something that often gets confused. I've had people give me, they're like, I found Beatrix Potter materials and they end up being Bunnykins. And of course, I appreciate those as well. And I do have a couple of those. But no, they started later. So The Tale of Peter Rabbit, 1902. And we've got these Bunnykins. They were introduced in the 30s and they have different characters. So you could imagine the influence, but they are different.
But of a similar artistic style for
Yes.
folks who haven't seen Bunnykins.
Yeah, so you've got anthropomorphized rabbits in
Mm.
clothes doing things. And but the color is a little different, the style is a little different, and you see those only with the ceramics.
Um, there's a question. Are the Beatrix Potter items at the library available to view online
So
in the
we do
special
have,
collections? Oh,
yeah, so the ones here in Iowa,
yes.
yes. Not necessarily, but we part of my job and the jobs of the librarians are to try to provide as much access as possible to those. So if there's something that really interests you that you know we have, reach out to us and we could provide digital surrogates, or we often will do like Zoom sessions with people. We can do remote programming. So if you're interested, let us know and just send us an email.
And someone else asked, and I think Tami answered this a little bit. What else do you all collect? Tami, we know you have your Sanford's collections and your apron collections.
Mhm.
Do you have anything else?
No, at this point, the aprons have taken over. And that's partly because it's what I'm doing actively right now. The other two are things that I just happen upon sometimes when I'm out, but I'm not actively collecting those, but the aprons definitely.
Lindsay, what about you?
Yes, I mean, as one can imagine, I definitely have the collecting bug, and they're really random. So I have a lot of nail polish, so lots and hundreds and hundreds of bottles of nail polish, and I also, strangely, which is probably the most polar opposite of Beatrix Potter, I collect the V.C. Andrews books. So if you're not familiar with V.C. Andrews, the writer of the infamous Flowers in the Attic story, so they still are published today under a ghostwriter. I find the books really interesting and just fun to collect. So the VC Andrews does not have his own room
Well, that's good. Otherwise, we might worry about you.
though. Yeah. Like,
Uh,
where are you keeping this?
so we have one last question, and I'm going to go back and share our screen because it relates very nicely to wrapping up uh, our bit about our next collections. So coming up next, if you want to see these collections in person, you have just a couple more weeks to do so because we're going to be deinstalling soon. You can find them here in McBride Hall. They're at the south end of the first floor while the museums themselves are closed for our winter hiatus. We're doing a lot of cleaning and refurbishing of things. My collections are in our hallways, so they're always available to you, and you can view them in the south hall of the first floor. Again, that's McBride Hall for a couple more weeks until we take them out. Going back in then in their place, we will have a great combination. Shoes and purses, although very different shoes and very different purses. So we'll be seeing Luke Mozina and sneakers and Rachel Stewart and the Enid Collins purses. I'm very excited to see both of these because I don't know much about either one. So that's going to be a lot of fun. The last question we have then for you both is what would you select? Um, what would you suggest, rather, to people who are thinking about applying to have their collections featured in my collections? And I'll remind folks who are listening, we do take applications. You can find them on Pentacrest Museums edu if you have a collection, and I think most of us do have collections of things. You can submit them. We're always taking applications if there's something you'd like to share with us. It's our way of opening up some gallery space to the public and seeing what you all are interested in. But Tami, Lindsay, what advice would you have for folks who are interested in applying?
For me, I would say be patient because there are only two exhibits each of the different semesters. I think I applied and it was almost 3 years before I got notification that mine had been selected. And so I think that's the biggest thing. First, throw your hat in the ring and then be patient.
Yeah, did you think, oh yeah, I did do that?
Yeah. Yep.
Lindsay, what's your advice?
I think to consider the audience, consider the location and consider the audience when you're thinking of what materials to display and how. You want to have something, you want to sort of catch the eye and you want to think, okay, we have students, we have lots of students from really all around the world looking at this space. So what might draw them in, and how you would display that as well.
I would agree.
Exactly.
I would agree with Lindsay too. One of the things that I remember on the application filling out was how your exhibit who would it attract? And I remember thinking in terms of the authors' games, people who are interested in gaming, somebody who's doing advertising, the lithography, the English connection, the librarianship, all of those kinds of things kind of pulled together in those boxes.
Yes, that's good. And if folks are interested to know what we have had on exhibit previously, all of the exhibitors in their collections can be found online. Again, that's www.pentacrestmuseums.edu, and we'll have that up in just a minute so folks can see that web address. But it's really a very interesting collection of collections, everything from geodes to bobbleheads and anything else you might be able to imagine. Oh, we have one late question and then another suggestion that I absolutely love. Lindsay, what is your most unusual piece of merchandise that you have?
It's kind of a hard question because there's just so much that you can make. Assuming that it gets approved by the licensing. I do have a toilet seat cover. Um, my friend Betsy, who I know is on the call, which is always a favorite when I bring for children's programming because they think it's just the funniest thing ever. It's not on my toilet seat. It's part of the collection. It's separate.
It kind of is the funniest thing ever. And then we have a suggestion, a collaborative creation of a game like authors specific to Peter Rabbit, which I think would be really lovely.
Yeah.
That would be quite delightful. Well, thank you both for being here. I want to take a minute to share with folks some upcoming programming that's coming. I mentioned that the museums are closed right now for our winter closure. We will open up again, though, at the end of January. You can find those dates also on the website. We'll open up with a new exhibit, Into Light. It's an exhibit that seeks to destigmatize drug addiction and the problems surrounding it. We're installing it right now, and I can tell you it's very touching and it's very beautiful. And there's one location in each state that is selected to exhibit it. I'm very proud to say that the Pentacrest Museums have been selected to represent the state of Iowa. So we feel that it's very important and there are a lot of opportunities for collaborative programming. So unlike most of our other exhibits that are up for a few months or maybe a semester, this exhibit will be up for an entire year. So it will run January through December, and really encourage folks to stop by and visit visit. And then beginning in February, one of our perennial favorites, Art and Write Night, is coming back. And again, for folks who may not be familiar with it, that's the first Friday of every month from 6 to 8 p.m. We open up our galleries to serve as your muse, and we invite you in to draw and write all to your heart's desire. With that, we'll wrap it up even a few minutes early. I'd like to give a special thanks to Jillian Geist and Sharina Honoré. You see their names on the screen. They were standing by in the wings, ready to pitch in case I had a complete failure, but I didn't. So thanks to all of our guests for sticking around and bearing with me and helping me get my sea legs as a webinar host. I feel really accomplished now. So that's great. And most of all, thank you also to Lindsay and Tami for sharing their insight and their expertise and their knowledge with us today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure to have you. Enjoy the rest of your day.